A Senate bill to ban abortions from the moment a pregnancy is detected was discussed today at the Statehouse. That bill would drastically change the state's current heartbeat law, which bans abortions at roughly 6 weeks. Statehouse reporter Stephen Biddix has the latest.
Lawmakers have tried and failed several times in recent years to tighten the state's heartbeat law. This latest attempt still remains unclear. A Senate committee was expected to take a vote on the bill today, but that ended up getting delayed. The bill eliminates exceptions for rape, incest, and fetal anomaly. The only exception, a medical emergency that could kill the mother or cause permanent physical harm. The bill would also classify abortion pills like mifepristone as a level 4 drug, targeting online and mail-order sales. That was the key topic in the brief hearing. Charleston Senator Dion Tedder, who opposes the bill, questions how this could even be enforced.
If there's no policing mechanism to disallow what we're trying to disallow, then essentially it will still be available.
But Senator Richard Cash says these medicated abortions have risen year after year and need to be stopped.
And a lot of people will follow the law if that's what they've been taught is the difference between right and wrong. And I'm not trying to elude your question.
Senators are expected to reconvene next week to continue working on the bill. If the Senate committee does approve it, it will then head to a full Senate vote. Reporting at the Statehouse, I'm Stephen Biddix.